Please forgive my English tongue. Probably going to say a lot of things incorrectly. And I tried to find the right pronunciation, but please forgive my English tongue for its offenses. Hi, let's talk about BL Manhwa. So even though I'm pretty sure that most of you watching this video are already familiar with BL Manhwa, and that's the sole reason how you found this video, I feel like I should start off with a few definitions. First off, manhwa is Korean comics. It's Korean manga. BL stands for boys love, which, from my understanding, doesn't really have a great definition. It's more just kind of a, if you see it, you know it. It doesn't really matter what BL means as much as we understand that BL just means it's about gay love. Basically. Can't make that promise always. For the sake of this video, when I say manhwa, I'm going to just be referring to BL Manhwa. So Lejin is one of the largest providers of webcomics of manhwa. And it has English translations, and from my understanding, it's a pretty big market for the English translations. They have a lot of different types, but I think they are the largest provider of BL Manhwa to the West. I just want to specify that I know very little about Korean culture, so I can't speak about the process by which BL as a genre emerged in Korea, and I can't speak for the effects that the manhwa has on the Korean culture. And so I'm just going to be discussing manhwa from a Western perspective, and mostly speaking about Western consumption to try to limit the amount of backlash I get for this video. So I started reading manhwa late 2017. Funny enough, it was through a Facebook ad. The data miners finally got me, realized that I was gay, and I might be interested in reading BL. Lejin was actually the service that popped up on my Facebook feed to advertise me all these BL comics, and it took me a while to actually get around to reading them. I'd often just read through like the 6 or 7 panels they had advertised and be like, huh, that's pretty interesting, but I don't know if I want to read it. I think it was Kingsmaker that got me to take the bait, finally. There was kind of a homoerotic tension going on, and that's when I really started becoming engrossed in manhwa. Unfortunately, I didn't like most of the manhwas that I read. I found them to be distasteful, boring, cliche. They seemed to be just kind of the same tropes over and over again. Some of them had really off-putting artwork, and I'll admit that they might have good story. I just couldn't get past the artwork. And this, of course, begs the question of why did I keep looking for more manhwa? You know, the first 5 I read, there's only one that I actually liked. So why did I keep looking for them? And I really think it comes down to the fact that I, at the time, was very hungry for gay representation, especially gay relationships in media. There's very little mainstream media that has gay characters in it, and a lot of them aren't that good. And even with stories that do have gay characters that are well written, they're not focused on that relationship, which is what BL focuses on solely. And so this desire at the time to really read romances that I could connect to as a gay man really pushed me into the manhwa world, and so I just kept looking and looking, going through so many manhwas to find just one that I could really connect to. And I did find them, eventually. But most of the manhwas that I read left me unfulfilled. And I think I figured out why. So switching over from manhwa to manga, since there's a lot more research on manga, there seems to be a common understanding that the relationships portrayed in the media are not necessarily real, but the same applies to manhwa in that the gay relationships portrayed aren't always realistic. In fact, a lot of them are very unrealistic. Reading them, I would think, wow, a gay guy would not act like that at all. And of course, in isolation, one story, you can just chalk it up to that's their character. But the problem is that the tropes the common occurrences, manhwa after manhwa after manhwa, where it's just the same thing each time, unrealistic gay characters. And that is a problem. It kind of goes into why is this? Why are the characters so unrealistic? And I think it's because in manga, the majority of the writers are straight women, and they are writing these gay love stories for other straight women. The intended audience is not gay men, which they're writing about. It is straight women, and oftentimes, historically, the relationships in these BLs and earlier yaois were just straight relationships with a gay skin over the top of it. So it wasn't actually depicting what a homosexual relationship would be like. It was just a straight relationship, except they're both men. And so you had the woman in the relationship and the man, dominant, submissive. And it was very problematic. From my experience in BL Manhwa, I would say that the written by straight women for straight women still applies. I just want to say real quick that writing outside of your sexuality isn't a bad thing. After all, love is love is love is love. But there are distinct things that you have to make sure you're doing when you are writing outside of your sexuality. And most of all, it's making sure that the characters are realistic and not just fitting into tropes. I couldn't find a lot of great hard data for the BL Manhwa specific. There was a lot of some yaoi research, but it's a little bit older. There was a study done by Pagliassotti just a couple of years ago studying Western audiences of their consumption of BL manga, and it found that in the US, 89% of the respondents to their survey were women. And there were, I think, about 50% of them were straight. A lot more of them were bisexual or unsure of their sexual orientation. So I think in the West, it's a little bit more balanced with queer audiences versus straight audiences. But the gay men, the subject of these stories is still a minority, a very small minority. Less than 9% of respondents were gay or bisexual men. So there might be a counter-argument here that it's good that these straights are just reading BL Manhwa because it has a positive effect on the opinions and perceptions of gay men. However, research contradicts this statement, at least in Japan. It's found that even though the majority of the audience that reads BL is straight women, they don't have positive perceptions of gay men, and they don't advocate for the rights of gay men in their native country. So it is possible that this genre doesn't have a positive effect on the perception of gay men, especially where the relationships aren't realistic. That's, I think, the real problem. Realistic. As I was reading through all the manhwas, and as I found that I didn't relate to these characters, they didn't feel like real gay men, these relationships didn't feel real, and as I did research into this and found out that with manga the majority of the authors are women, the majority of the readers are not men, these are not stories created by men, and then kind of realizing that the same applies to the manhwa, I became increasingly uncomfortable with this. The main reason this became overwhelmingly uncomfortable for me is the amount of explicit content in these things. So many of them have explicit sex scenes inside of them. Drawn, written, read overwhelmingly by women. Gay sex scenes written by women for women. And if you just look at the top BLs on Legend, you got Make Me Bark, Love is an Illusion, BJ Alex, Loverboy, Behind the Scenes, Following Namsu to the Bathhouse, Make Me Bark. All of them are all of them very explicit. And sex scenes in and of themselves aren't a problem. Sex is a normal human interaction. Of course, if you're writing a romance between two characters, it's natural to include sex, as that's a natural aspect of the romances. But the problem is, there's two problems. The sex scenes are there for sex scenes' sake. They're just there for the sole purpose of being erotic. When you're writing a sex scene, it shouldn't just be there as a sex scene. It should be serving other purposes, whether that's character building, establishing the relationship dynamic. There are many ways to make a sex scene not just a sex scene. Now, when you're doing writing, everything you do should have a purpose, and better yet, multiple purposes, like in action movies. Action scenes, for the sake of action scenes, can get boring, can be uninteresting, but if you're able to do multiple things within an action scene, they become much more vibrant and alive, and it makes the movie overall better. A great example of this is Reality Punch Studios' video, Pirates of the Caribbean, Accidentally Genius. He talks about how Pirates of the Caribbean uses the action scenes to do multiple different things, at least the first one, to do multiple things at once, and that's what makes it great. I say the same applies to sex scenes in literature, where they shouldn't just be included for the eroticism factor, but should serve different purposes. Building the character, establishing the relationship, creating tension between the characters, or giving some sort of release. Second problem is that they're not realistic. And that is by far the worst of any of it. When the sex scenes are unrealistic, especially when the dynamic between them is unrealistic, or just the whole, like, how male anatomy works and they get it wrong, it's just, no, just no. If these reasons haven't convinced you that these sex scenes are bad, objectively bad, I don't have any other argument to give you. I don't have any good counter arguments for what you might make. I don't have a framework established to discuss why these are bad. I just have, from a literature standpoint, having sex scenes for the eroticism factor is bad because you could be doing more with it. But beyond that, it makes me, as a gay man, incredibly uncomfortable to know that these sex scenes are written by and consumed by women. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. I am not your fetish. I wanted to talk about some of the more problematic tropes. So tropes in and of themselves aren't bad, but here's why some tropes are bad. When they're used without an understanding of their context in the narrative or the overall structure of the genre, when it's not understood their origin or how to actually use them, when it's included solely because that's what the person has read and so they're just regurgitating the tropes, that's when it gets bad. When they're unexamined and they're allowed to pass through, and when they carry unintended side effects that promote wrong worldviews or establish incorrect opinions about things, that's when tropes get bad. I just want to talk about some of the worst offenders in the BL Manhwa, because what else am I going to do in a video about the BL Manhwa? I think the worst one is when it's not entirely consensual. And it is a trope that rears its ugly, misshapen, terrible head so many times throughout every one. It's in, like, every single one. There's always someone saying, no, wait, don't do this. And the other person does it anyways. And the worst offender of this is when they're like, but your body says yes. But you're hard, but you're erect. But look at you, you're shaking. But There's a great video about this. It's called The Truth About Unwanted Arousal by Emily Nagoski. And it talks about this concept called arousal non-concordance, where the way your body acts does not reflect what you actually want. And it's a great video. I definitely recommend checking it out. Even if you already agree with me, it has great science behind it that just really helps solidify and give you arguments for arousal non-concordance. It's attitudes like that. It's, well, your body says yes, that create so many problems. I can't even get into it. My personal least favorite tropes are, but you're a dude. I can't be into you because we're both dudes. So, sorry. I get that a lot of stories about gay men will involve the aspect of coming out and coming to grips with their sexuality, but honestly, can I just have a story where it's a happy love story? I know that it's very real to have society be against you and to have that issues, but can I just have one happy love story? Please? Another terrible offending trope that hurts every time I see it is the word being interpreted differently by different characters. And I'm not sure if this is a problem with how it's written or with just how it's translated, but in the English language it's a really cheap shot to use the word and to have that miscommunication between characters. One character's like, I like you, in the romantic way, and the other character's like, oh, I like you too, but in the friendship way. Because that's just... miscommunication is usually just a very bad way to create conflict in a story. Everyone hates it. No one likes it. It's often lazy writing. It's just a terrible, terrible trope. Another bad trope is that everyone is fit. There's just one body type and a few variations off that body type, and it's fit. It's tall and fit. You got abs and pecs, and there's no one with a soft tummy because everyone's fit in these stories, and it's problematic, and I hate it. But I also kind of like it. Another one, and this is a little bit one of the weirder ones, is when people get surprised when the other male character gets an erection via stimulation to the prostate or through anal stuff. I think the worst offender, and the one that comes to mind first, is in Loverboy, where Yoonho is you're already getting hard, and it's yeah, dude, it's a sexual situation, of course. It's a very natural thing. Does the author not know this? Is the guy just uninformed about how the body works? I don't know. I hate it. Another bad trope, the will they, won't they. It kind of falls under the but we're guys, we can't like each other trope. This trope is really just lazy writing. Instead of creating actual conflict between them or creating real reasons for why they might not get together, they just rely on the do I like you? Do I not like you? I don't know. We don't know. I'm gonna spend 60 chapters going over the same thing back and forth because I don't know how to write a real romance. I couldn't really think of any more of the tropes. I'm sure there's quite a few. Feel free to point them out to me. I'd love to get more tropes, more fuel for my fodder to throw at people and get passionate about when I see it in stories. I love that. So that's the video. That's basically all I have. I would definitely recommend checking out all the sources that I've listed. There's a lot of topics I didn't cover, and I tried to include different perspectives, and not necessarily ones that I solely agree with either. They are, I think, incredibly helpful to kind of understanding this issue a bit better. And even if you don't agree with them, just kind of understanding the other side can be very useful. And the research is also very great to have. I wish there was more, but, c'est la vie. I hope that you've learned something interesting, and if not, at least I hope that you're starting some sort of flame war in the comments and calling me mean names, because I definitely like that. Oh, heaven help us.